Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Lawrence Haddad. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or GAIN, and welcome to this CFS symposium entitled Google Maps for Food Systems, a new dashboard to inform better food and nutrition policy. The session's called somewhat frivolously, you might think, Google Maps, but the spirit behind that is that food systems are complex. We know we need to transform them to generate better outcomes in the diet, realm, climate, biodiversity, and livelihoods. But it's not always obvious to policymakers and other stakeholders what to do. What does their food system look like? Where is it strong and where is it not so strong? And what policies are available to them to change the dynamic and transform their food systems. So that's the spirit of this 90-minute session. We have a fantastic set of speakers and panelists for you, and we'll make sure there's enough Q&A time for all of you to get involved in the session. So before I turn it over to our two keynote speakers, I'd like to introduce Anna Larty, who's the Director of Nutrition at UN Food and Agriculture Organization. Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First, I'd like to thank GAIN, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and Johns Hopkins University for inviting FAO to jointly organize this CFS event on a dashboard to inform better food and nutrition policy. In our quest for the future we want, countries made a solemn pledge at the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 to leave no one behind. Sadly, many are being left behind in the most fundamental need of life, and that is the access to a healthy diet. You all have heard about the outcome of SOFI 2020, which the report clearly confirmed that 3 billion people globally cannot afford a healthy diet. In fact, other reports, for example, the Global Panel also in 2020 in their future for food systems confirmed that the achievement of many of the Sustainable Development Goals have been increasingly in doubt. And even before COVID, we couldn't meet our goals. Today, poor diets are driving a lot of the situation, the nutrition situation. For example, today, diet-related non-communicable diseases have become the leading cause of disease and premature death. Not only that, many low and middle-income countries will collapse under the economic burden of diet-related non-communicable diseases. For example, the economic impact of diabetes for East Asia and Pacific regions by 2030 is estimated to be 800 billion. And for sub-Saharan Africa, it's been estimated to be about 52 billion. Another issue with our food systems is that agriculture investments are heavily skewed towards the production of staple crops, rice, wheat, and maize, with little investment in nutritious crops such as fruits, vegetables, pulses, etc. Our food systems have also become a source of environmental degradation. Agricultural production continues to contribute about 13% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. We know that food systems are evolving. We need data, we need information on how food systems can better perform and actually address and meet our needs. Many reports in the last 2 years have come out suggesting what must be done to enable food systems to deliver healthy diets and a healthy planet. But we need to move beyond the what and also address the how. Today, you will hear about the Food Systems Dashboard, a unique and collaborative effort to better describe food systems and also give policymakers the option on how to sustainably promote healthy diets and improve nutrition through the provision of data that reflects their national situation. FAO is pleased to partner with GAIN and Johns Hopkins and the other partners on the dashboard for several reasons. For us at FAO, because of our commitment to support our members in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, we believe that the dashboard can contribute to this. We also harness data and information to inform action at country level. This is key support that FAO gives to countries that are looking at transforming their food systems. FAO will contribute to the objectives of the food systems dashboard by bringing various stakeholders and partners to a neutral platform to facilitate sharing knowledge, data, and technical expertise. FAO will also continue to provide key indicators related to food production, food availability, and food security, as well as dietary indicators and data that can contribute to the richness of the food systems dashboard. So in conclusion, I'll say that the dashboard provides the opportunity to change the direction of our food systems, get it going in the direction we want. On this note, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you. And Lawrence, the floor is back to you. The mic is back to you.
Thank you, Anna. Really, really nice and inspiring introductory comments. Thank you so much. And it's so great to have FAO as the apex organization in the normative space of food and agriculture be a partner of the dashboard. We really appreciate it. Colleagues on the line, participants, we have two keynote speakers for you now. They are both professors of food policy. First, we have Jessica Fanzo, who's a professor of food policy at Johns Hopkins University. And then we will have Corinna Hawkes, who's a professor at City University of London. Jessica will talk about the food systems dashboard, and Corinna will talk about the no regrets work on the policy, which is closely linked to the dashboard. Jessica's going to show us some slides and then a video. So over to you, Jessica.
Great. Thank you so much, Lawrence. Thank you to the CFS, Chris Hegedorn and colleagues, and to FAO for giving us this opportunity to show the dashboard, and really looking forward to the conversations. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I'll quickly present a bit of highlights of the dashboard. And of course, as Anna had mentioned, this has been a really fantastic collaboration for the last 2 years with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, with Lawrence leading that, Johns Hopkins and the Food and Agriculture Organization. Of course, we've had other partners from other universities and entities, Michigan State, University of Michigan, Harvard. We've had the Global Burden of Disease colleagues, CIAT, Bioversity. A whole lot of people have been involved in the thinking, as well as contributing data to the dashboard. So why a food systems dashboard? Why do we even need one? Well, I think we can all agree there's been increased international attention to food systems and their importance in shaping diets, health and nutrition outcomes, environmental sustainability, and livelihoods of many working along the entire food supply chain. But policymakers are often in the dark on how to manage their food systems. And as Anna said, they need data and they need information. They need to know where and how to start and how to potentially fix food system challenges that they face. So there's a real need for tools, and dashboard is only one of those tools to help policymakers contextualize their food systems and their linkages to those key outcomes like diets, environment, and other development outcomes. Food systems data is found across many different databases. There's a lot of food data being collected around the world. It's often just hard to find, or it's not pulled together cohesively, or it's hard to interpret. So the goals of the dashboard, we have what we call the 3 Ds. This was coined by Lawrence, and now we've stuck to it. Describe, diagnose, and decide. Describing is what the dashboard currently does. It describes food systems, national food systems. It allows you to compare across food systems by income or typology across a whole wealth of different indicators. The next two features that we want to have on the dashboard are diagnose and decide. Diagnose would allow stakeholders to not only compare their food systems, but decide whether or not they're doing well or not doing well, and where there are potentially hangups, where there are potentially challenges, where they could be striving to do better. And then once they have the diagnose, they could then make decisions. And this is the work that we are collaborating with Corinna Hawks, which we're really thrilled about. And she's going to talk more about that, about priority areas of action. What can stakeholders do? What can policymakers do to improve their food systems once they've been able to look at them in a deeper way and figure out what's on or off track? So here's the main page, and I hope all of you go to it. I'll share the URL at the end. We launched June 1st, and we've organized our data around the high-level panel of experts, nutrition and food systems report, in which we've tried to map indicators across this entire framework of food supply chains, food environments, individual factors that people face when they engage in the food systems, outcomes like diets, nutrition, health, socioeconomic, and environment, as well as on the top here, drivers that are shaping and shifting food systems, many exogenous to the food system. And we have about 170 indicators, and most of these indicators are representing all countries in the world, not just high-income countries, which you often see on some databases. And we're working on linking, how do these different indicators link to each other in a causal pathway? If you go to the dashboard, you'll see there's many different ways to look at data. We try to make the data very easy to interpret, visually appealing for those who don't want to necessarily figure out how to display data. So we've provided country profile tools that allow for easy access to data and easy individual country looks at how to look at the data in a very interpretable way. We have, of course, many users, but our main users are policymakers, national statistical agency workers, and of course, policy analysts that are working in government ministries. But of course, we want everyone to use the dashboard. We hope UN, NGO development practitioners use it, civil society workers, business leaders and entrepreneurs. And naturally, researchers, academics, and students will be very drawn to the dashboard because of its breadth of data. So here's the domain, www.foodsystemsdashboard.org. Please go to it, give us feedback, use it. We'll be collaborating with more partner organizations. We always welcome more partnerships. And this January, we'll be doing a big push. We're going to be moving to about 250 indicators, many from the SOFI report, the cost of diets, but more so some local burden of disease data and more environmental and climate change data that are linked to sustainable diets. We will be doing some country pilots this year in Senegal and Ethiopia and Tanzania. And we really hope that this is a tool for the 2021 UN Food Summit, and it will be used to prepare for the summit as well as after. So I'm going to share a video. If I can get there. Okay, here we go.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks for such a nice presentation and for the video. If you haven't gone to the website, please do. I love the time-lapse charts, especially the bubble ones. We're channeling Hans Rosling on that. So thank you, Jess. That's great. And now I'd like to turn it over to Corinna Hawkes. We're so lucky to have two world-leading professors on our panel at the same time. Corinna, over to you. Corinna's going to talk to us about the No Regrets work.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, and greetings to everyone on this session today. It's fantastic that you've all joined, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And thanks also to the CFS and others who've given us this opportunity. Thank you. I think you can all see my slides now. I'm going to talk about this No Regrets actions process, and I want to really thank Jess and Lawrence and their teams for the leadership they've shown on the food systems dashboard. It was wonderful to see it set out so clearly on that video there. And I'm really excited about integrating the work that I've been leading on with my colleague Stephanie Walton, as well as Lawrence and Jess, on taking this, looking at the policies that can be integrated and used in the dashboard. So the question we want policymakers to ask is, what do I need to change about my food system to improve diets? That's what we want them to ask. We know that some policymakers are asking that question, and we think it's an important question for policymakers as well as other stakeholders in the food system. What we're working to do is to provide an answer to that question. Now, there have been a lot of reports over the past few years which have provided recommendations, lots of them. And as you map the evolution of those reports, they get better and better in terms of the evidence they're drawing upon. and the nuance they are showing and the specificity of those recommendations. So there's a lot there to work from to answer that question. And what becomes clear from those reports, and indeed work in general in nutrition and diets and in many other areas, is that we know that success requires an understanding of context. And action isn't going to be necessarily successful if it's applied or designed in a way which isn't matching the context. For example, the context which the food systems dashboard sets out, which is the type of food system into which we're implementing an action. What is suitable for an industrialized system isn't necessarily suitable for a rural and traditional system, for example. But actually, when you think about it, there are some actions which are actually needed everywhere. They're needed in the most developed food system and the most underdeveloped. They may have already taken place in the more developed food system to the less developed food system, but they're absolutely necessary and fundamental in order to get food systems working to improve diets. If we don't take these actions, food systems just are never going to be fit for purpose for improving diets. There aren't going to be very many of those actions, but they're the absolute basics, the fundamentals, the actions that no one committed to improving diets would ever regret taking, because in whatever context, they're likely to have impact and they're feasible to implement. These are the actions that go beyond context, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about the no regrets actions. I like to say they're the just do it actions. If you're really serious about improving diets, just do this, get it done. Now, we've been very careful and cautious in our approach and saying, well, is this really possible? We believed it was possible, but is it really? So we've been incredibly cautious and as rigorous as we possibly can in very, very being adaptive and flexible all the way through this process. And so the methodology that we've taken, and we're thinking that maybe there's around 10 of these actions, though of course we can't be certain, is to go back to those reputable reports, to go back to the reports which are based on a tremendous amount of expert input, discussion, and evidence, and looked at them really carefully and said, what do these reports recommend about what happens needs to happen in food systems to improve diets? And we went through all of those reports and we extracted in a lot of detail the recommendations. That led to well over 200 actions being identified. Actually, then we went back to reread those reports. We realized that the spirit of those recommendations was often not do this very isolated action and believe it's going to function. But actually, this action needs to be implemented in the context of some broader thinking and some broader design, not just doing one tiny thing, but perhaps acting throughout the food supply chain rather than just one part of it. So we wanted to be really clear that we'd really understood that more holistic approach to these actions which were being recommended. So we developed a decision tree and we consolidated the actions that we'd already selected into a much smaller number. And the effect of that, this isn't what we were expecting to do originally. The effect of that was actually to lead to actions which were much, much more robust. So the second part was to say, okay, so these have been recommended in expert reports, but do they actually really have potential to impact? How robust are they? So we developed a logic model for each and every action. And we looked, following the HLP report and other reports, how they could be expected to have impact throughout the system, supply chain, food environments, on consumers. So it will lead to a change in dietary intake. And we didn't just think generally, we thought, okay, what population could this most benefit? What foods or group of foods could it most benefit? And what form of malnutrition could it most benefit? So we wanted to drill down and get more targeted about what we were looking at. Then the second question was what factors on the ground might actually undermine the action's ability to have impact? So we went through and we using our knowledge and background work and so on, said, okay, actually, it sounds good on paper, but what's really going to undermine this? Is something going to happen here that is going to mean it won't have the intended impact? And we also, taking a food systems approach, the importance of understanding the trade-offs with environment and livelihoods and economies, that we actually started to map out some of those trade-offs and win-wins as well. So part 3 then of the methodology is that we're saying we've done this very robust, very rigorous, I have to say very, very time-consuming process. Now we want to go out to the experts in the field. And if you want to be one of those experts, please let us know. People who are policymakers and practitioners in the field. And we're going to do a survey to ask each of them to score these actions about which ones they think is the most plausible and where the pathway to impact is most likely to be plausible. And then we're also going to have a follow-up interview process, which is going to be looking at actually feasibility on the ground. So that's what we've done to come up with this small number. And then in conversation with Jess and Lawrence, it became clear that because this longer list of 40 odd actions is actually pretty robust, we had an opportunity for integrating it into the food systems dashboard. This is a list that if you think about it, if you think, okay, this is an analysis of the country's indicators in the dashboard, this is what we can diagnose about this system, and using all of that information, given that we've mapped all of these actions according to type of food, malnutrition, part of the food system, we've got it all mapped out. Actually, you can actually say, in this context, given these indicators, we can say that this action could actually be effective to address the specific problem in context. So this has broadened out this short list that we were thinking of to actually bring in the contextual aspect and to say, in this context, what's going to be needed. So this is going to be an important next step, and you can see briefly how it can work here. That you identify the issue, you make an observation about diet, you understand the cause, all of which is already mapped out in the pathway to impact and big spreadsheet that we put together for each of these actions. Then we can filter, and then we can come up with a short list of recommendations of what action will be suitable in context. I'll end there. Thank you very much. I'd like to also just inform you that there is a blog published more about this process if you are interested in finding more about it. And here is the connection to that, the web link to that. I'd also, of course, like to thank SIF for funding this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corinna. Really nice, short, sharp presentation. No regrets, no excuses. Corinna, if you can unshare the screen, great. Thank you so much. Well, the panelists and Anna have done a great job of sticking to time, and so we've got time for our panel discussion. We've got a great set of panelists. I'll introduce them one by one. But first of all, I'd like to introduce Roy Steiner. And Roy and Jessica have amazingly enough made themselves available to us, even though it's about 5 in the morning where they are. So thank you so much, Jess and Roy. Roy is the Senior Vice President for the Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. Roy, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good. Nice to see you too, Roy. Looking very, very spiffy for this time in the morning. I'm impressed. Hey. Yeah. Roy, the Rockefeller Foundation is really committed to transforming food systems. You've got all sorts of initiatives that you're pioneering and spearheading. You're a current supporter of the dashboard, and we thank you for that. What are your hopes for it, and how can the No Regrets work support the efforts of some of your partners? Over to you, Roy.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, and for Corinna and Jessica. They're great presentations. You know, I love this project for so many different ways. You know, it's been said that the data is the new oil, but just like any other new form of wealth, I think it's being monopolized and is really not accessible to everyone in the way that it should be. And I think this is a great example of democratizing data so that people can make better decisions. And if you go to some of the, the largest multinational corporations in the world, they have extraordinary data teams and resources. And we need to enable that for everyone so that we can all have access to data that enables us to make better decisions, and that we create more transparency in the food system. The other reason I love this project is that, there's been this incredible shift in the way we're describing food. And it's the idea of food systems. It's the reason why we have a food systems summit. And when you start talking about food systems, you need to understand all the different dimensions and elements. And the fact that this enables you to start seeing the interconnections allows us to really start developing system thinking and system approaches. The other thing I wanted to just touch base on is with, Karina mentioned how important context is. As you know, Lawrence, we launched this Food System Vision Prize, and we had thousands of groups around the world trying to envision what their future would be in 2050. And we really struggled to, because they wanted data. They wanted to be able to understand what exactly is happening now so that we can plan for the future. And there wasn't really good data, right? Because it was so difficult to find, as Jessica mentioned. And I think this goes a long way to enable people anywhere in the world to understand their particular food system context, so that they can do the discovery, the diagnosis, and decide better for themselves. And I think that is extraordinary. I love that the title of this session is the Google of Food, because if you think of it, Google is really just a database. It's a whole bunch of just numbers, and it wouldn't be useful if we didn't have an interface to it that enabled us to think and decide and do all those things that make it so useful. And when you think about this, there's a ton of data out there, but this enables us to the interface and makes it usable and accessible, and enables us to do sense making. And I think that's extraordinarily valuable because then it can turn things that are opaque, confusing, and enable us to visualize it, to access it. And my hope is that there's going to be all these new ideas that get built upon this, so that, just like Google, you can start building, Google Maps and then Ubers and all these other things, because that's what democratizing data enables us to do. So want to just thank everyone who worked on this project and really have high hopes for moving this forward. Back to you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Roy, and we thank Rockefeller for the intellectual leadership in this space. It's exactly what foundations should be doing, is taking risks, and you guys are taking great calculated risks. Thank you for doing that. And your point about democratizing data, we just finished the first competition for the dashboard, user competition, and we got some incredible submissions and incredible applications of it. A couple were for school kids, actually, to help school kids understand the food systems around them. So we'll be announcing the 4 winners in a session later this week in one of the World Food Prize sessions. So, but thank you so much, Roy. I really appreciated your points. Let me now turn to Hans Hugevin. Hans is the ambassador and permanent representative of the Netherlands to the UN for Food and Agriculture. Hans, welcome. Hans, my question is that the CFS, many of us know that CFS is developing voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. How do you tell us a bit about how you expect the countries to use these guidelines once they're approved? And do you see any links between the guidelines and the no regrets work that Karina has just presented? So Hans, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those who are listening and are in this important event for CFS. And first of all, of course, with the Nobel Prize for WFP, the wind is in our sails for food security, because there's no peace without food security and no food security without peace. But it gives us also the obligation to make it happen, to go to action. And I think the voluntary guidelines for food systems and nutrition are crucial. And I'm proud to head the negotiations. And we are going to get them at the end of this year, because we cannot afford not agreeing to the guidelines. And the guidelines are going to help not only guide governments in getting into action for food systems and healthy diets, but if you read the guidelines, they should also be implemented by the other stakeholders, like the private sector, like NGOs, like civil society. But when I see the dashboard, sometimes I ask the question, do we still need those guidelines? Because everything is already in the dashboard. But I think they are, complementary to each other and will add value. And certainly, we know that sustainable food systems and healthy diets are very much interlinked. We know that sustainable production includes also conserving, managing, and sustainably using biodiversity, amongst others, biodiversity and ecosystems. And we have to also focus on sustainable consumption patterns, because also they help healthy diets. They are included in the guidelines when it comes to the chapters where, for example, transparent, democratic, and accountable governance, about food supply chains to make them affordable, to make them more sustainable, and also in the context of climate change. It's about equal and equitable access to healthy diets. The food safety issues addressed, as well as, of course, the nutrition knowledge, education, and information. And last but not least, gender equality and how important women's empowerment are to achieve sustainable food systems and to achieve healthy diets. But at the end of the day, we know it's important that we can measure our success. And for that, it's great that we have the tool of the dashboard, because we need the data to see how we are proceeding. But at the end of the day, as also said by Anna, the question is, how are we going to do it? And that's, we have to act. We cannot afford to sit on our laurels and not to act. And that's, I think, where the guidelines are so important, because they have to reassure that governments are going to act. They reassure that the private sector is going to act. And that means that we have to invest in sustainable food systems and healthy diets. And investing means to make concrete programs and projects. And we are now, for example, the World Bank, FAO, and the Netherlands is going to start an investment facility which starts programs in food losses, for example, starting in Nigeria. And we're thinking of expanding it to an investment facility, a matchmaking facility for food systems. I think that's where we have to focus on. At the end of the day, we can only be satisfied if we are successful using the dashboard to show that we can make progress and that we can make success in concrete action on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. And we'll come back to the guidelines, I'm sure, in the Q&A, but I think it's an absolutely critical part of the mapping of the food system space. And we look forward to seeing the final set of guidelines. Of course, they will evolve. They're a living set of guidelines, I'm sure, but we will come back to those later on. So thank you so much, Hans, and thank you for your leadership in the negotiation process, which I can imagine is incredibly time consuming and requires extraordinary levels of diplomacy and skill. Thank you. You'll get there. I'm really happy now to be able to present to you two ambassadors, Ambassador Andayani from Indonesia and Ambassador Olaniran from Nigeria. And we invited the two ambassadors because we have been, colleagues in Indonesia and Nigeria have reached out to the dashboard team and said, look, this dashboard is kind of intriguing. We're thinking about developing one for our countries, a dashboard, because our countries are so big and so spatially distributed. They have so many provinces and states we need a national dashboard, but one that works at the subnational level in a very serious way. So we thought we would invite the ambassadors from those two countries, and we're very honored that they both said yes. So let me start out with Ambassador Andayani. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, the food system dashboard team is engaging with experts in your country, in Indonesia, and discussing the possibilities of developing an Indonesian food system dashboard. Now, tell us, how can this kind of data resource be helpful to the government of Indonesia's efforts to transform its food systems? Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Haddad. First of all, I thank the Food System Dashboard team for their initial contact with the government of Indonesia. Indeed, the collaboration should aim at supporting our own efforts in ensuring food security and, of course, for better food healthy diet through a solid database for policymakers to make decisions. Indeed, the issue data is pertinent to us, since, like you said, that Indonesia is an archipelagic country with over 17,000 islands with various levels of development, geographical, and ethno-linguistic diversity. One of the main issues is that our data can be outdated and varied, especially in agricultural sector, where data collected by the Ministry of Agriculture many times differed with data from Statistics Indonesia and agricultural associations. And these differences oftentimes trigger debates on how to decide and apply the best agricultural policy, such as whether or not Indonesia needs to import certain agricultural products for better food and healthy diet, or identification and allocation of resources needed, such as seeds, fertilizers, and human resources, as well as capacity needed. To address this issue, various agencies in Indonesia have continuously coordinated efforts in harmonizing data. Such harmonization efforts range from methodology, sampling, reading analysis, and recommendation. And to further strengthen and consolidate this effort, actually, the President of Indonesia has issued Presidential Number Regulations number 39 of last year concerning One Indonesian Data, or we call it Satu Data Indonesia. And in principle, it is ensured that the data produced is high quality and can be shared and used together by anybody. In order to follow up on the President regulations, the Ministry of Agriculture, as one of government institutions responsible for Indonesia food security reforms data, established the Agricultural War Room. Its function as a data center and a national technology-based agriculture development control systems. These dual functions are expected to track real data better and to provide a clearer picture of survey crop productivity. And this War Room agriculture monitoring system will benefit from the use of advanced technologies like satellites, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence to generate real-time information on paddy fields, fertilizer supply, and harvest areas. So Statistics Indonesia is closely consulted at every stage of this agriculture war room in the process, so that the data resulted are similar and can serve as a solid basis for all users to take a policy. Against all above, the engagement of the food system dashboard team with our expert is considered timely in order to strengthen our country efforts to address data challenges. The notions of Indonesian food system dashboard should be part of and support our agricultural war room that has been established. So this is how we use and benefit from this data to transform its food system. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Haddad.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's wonderful to hear about this agriculture agriculture data war room with real-time data using all these innovative data collection techniques. I'm not surprised. Those of us who know Indonesia know that you have been a global leader in the collection and democratization and joining up of data through the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Planning, and Bappenas, and all sorts of organizations. So we thank you for your leadership, and we look forward to working with you in the Ag War Room.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now let me turn to Ambassador Olaniran. Ambassador, I think you're on the line. Are you there? Ambassador.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes,
Hi.
I'm on. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Ambassador, again, similar question to the previous speaker, previous panelist. We know that Nigeria doesn't have one food system, it has probably hundreds of food systems. How can data and possibly the dashboard help the government begin to build on its efforts to describe, analyze, and decide how to transform its food system? Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Data has been one of the key elements. The quality of data, in actual fact, is one of the key elements that could decide whether a policy will be on the right note and the action to follow will be successful. So this dashboard is critical to Nigeria, but there must be serious awareness campaign for the usage. A lot more people should be made aware of using this maximally. The effort that has gone into it by the different entities that have put this together is tremendous, and maximum use must be made. Obviously, Nigeria is at the threshold of getting her acts together to move forward. The COVID-19 has created tremendous pressure, not only on food security, but also on the quality of the food. And like you rightly said, Nigeria has hundreds of food types, ranging from the mangrove, southern end of Nigeria, to the desert end in the northern part. And the food systems change from one zone to the other. The diets also are in that same line. What is key is that the pulling together of the ministries that are involved in food and nutrition. Agriculture pops out first, but then the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Youth, and the Ministry of Women Affairs, and of course, Environment. All we need to work together to maximize the use of this dashboard. And then fundamentally, there must be a streamlining of the data that they have to use. There must be agreement in terms of what are the critical data. Because when we all know the source of the data the quality of the data either through GIS or drones or ICTs, then we will be able to know exactly what each of them will mean in our various ministries. But again, the quality and the quantity of food should also be well laid out. Because one thing is to have food that is enough. Another thing is to be able to afford it. If you don't eat enough, you are not likely going to get enough nutrients or energy. And it's also a platform that can be used to prevent malnutrition, obesity, and all those parameters that are creating problems. So at the end of it, we need it, and we need it desperately.
Thank you, Ambassador. That was I really noted some of your key points. It needs to be used. If it's just a database and it's not used, then it's just a tool for researchers, and it needs to be much more than that. We need to focus on the quality of food now more than ever during the COVID period, where immune systems need to be maintained, and issues like obesity and hypertension need to be addressed. The dashboard and data in general can be a way of bringing ministries together to work together, to work across departmental boundaries. And I noticed a call that you made that's very similar to the ambassador from Indonesia's call about new technologies to bring in data that is more accurate and more timely and more reliable. So thank you so much, Ambassador. Really insightful presentation. I'd like to now pass to Sophia Ascari. Sophia is the Director of Child Health and Development at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, or commonly known as CIF. Sophia, welcome. CIF was one of the early investors in the dashboard and in the No Regrets work. Tell us a bit about why you think this work has the potential to be really important for children, and what are you hoping to see emerge in the next year or two? Over to you, Sophia.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I feel it's a deep privilege to be here, to be a part of this discussion. As you mentioned, CIF is one of the largest philanthropy dedicated for children. We are also one of the few philanthropies that works for both children and climate. Food system lies at the heart of both these issues. Some data, in 2019, 50 million children were wasted. They were too thin for height. At the same time, 40 million children were overweight. 340 million children suffered from deficiencies of micronutrients and vitamins. Our food systems do not produce the food we need in the places that we need it. Climate change is increasing food insecurity, is lowering the nutritional quality of the crops. COVID is increasing the urgency of these issues. On the other side, agriculture, forestry, and land use, it accounts for 24% of the global emissions. This threatens the future of the children. The food system needs to be transformed to be responsive to the health of the people as well as the planet, but lack of data hindered action. Food is cultural. We needed data at country level, data which considered the food environment, but also the consumer choices. The food system dashboard now has all this data in an easily accessible place and takes into account the differences in the geographies and the local context. Now with the dashboard in place, lack of data can no longer remain an excuse for inaction. In the next 2 years, what I want to see is, number one, the dashboard and the No Regrets work being able to give some tangible interventions which can impact the food system and the land use policies in the countries. Some quick wins will be needed urgently. I'm also hoping that the dashboard will be used by countries to transform their food systems. The government will use it to measure progress and hold itself accountable for its actions. I'm also hoping that children will use it to protect themselves from the unhealthy diets that threatens their health and well-being. I do believe, Lawrence, that as we socialize this dashboard, children are a part of this revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for reminding us that even though this session is focused on diets, there are many other outcomes that food systems generate. And I think we all are beginning to see them as inseparable and indivisible, just as we don't like to separate human rights, which human rights we support and protect. We don't want to have to choose. We want to look for the synergies and mitigate any trade-offs that are there. Thank you also for reminding us that this has to lead to action. If it doesn't, then we have really failed. And I think the dashboard and the No Regrets team take this very seriously. And thank you for reminding us that children are not just recipients of things, of data, of policies. They have agency, and they can influence and act themselves. And as I mentioned, in the food system dashboard prize that we're going to announce tomorrow, a couple of the prize winners have taken this very much to heart, and I've said, how can we use this tool to inform children and give them a bit more agency. So thank you, Sophia, very much for your thoughts and encouragements and support. Saskia, let me turn to you. Saskia Depay is a senior technical advisor and chief of the nutrition division at the World Food Programme. And like Hans, I want to extend congratulations to all of our colleagues and partners and supporters of the World Food Programme, past and present. It's a magnificent honor, and it's fantastic for the field and the issues, and most importantly for people who are at risk of hunger and malnutrition. Now, Saskia, you're a leading researcher in this space, and you're a pioneer in the work of the cost of nutrient adequate diets. Your work is featured in the Sophia report recently and in many other places. How could the dashboard and the No Regrets work be more useful for the World Food Programme in its efforts to get nourishing food to some of the most vulnerable people in the world? So Saskia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, and thank you for the congratulations. WFP is really humbled and honored with this Nobel Peace Prize, and we feel it's also really an acknowledgement of the work we do together with all our partners in this food and nutrition space and in supporting the most vulnerable. So to your question, WFP operates in 80 low and middle income countries. We reach over 100 million people annually directly with food assistance, which can be in-kind food provision and can be like cash and voucher programming. And we work with governments and partners to support the most vulnerable by strengthening systems, and in particular food and social protection systems. Through that work, we have an in-depth understanding of local food systems because of the local sourcing, because of the finding modalities to improve access for the most vulnerable, and to ensure access to nutritious, safe, and healthy diets. As you refer to it, our systems-focused nutrition situation analysis, known as Fill the Nutrient Gap, of the team that I lead, specifically assesses the extent to which consumers have the possibility to choose a healthy diet, and looks at how systems can improve their choice options. And we do it very much with stakeholders in country. We ask them for their issues, for their data, and through that gain an in-depth understanding of their local food system. And with that, they then they decide what to prioritize for change. So this really intersects very nicely with the food systems dashboard and also with the No Regrets work. So far, we're really using the opportunity of our engagement with countries, stakeholders, to analyze, to review what's on the dashboard and to apply it and to think about the consequences for the policies. So going forward, you asked about any improvements that we may recommend. I'm really looking forward to see the SOFI 2020 data on the dashboard. We can even think of the adjustment for the COVID reductions of expenditure with previous modeling, which we're preparing together with the Standing Together for Nutrition initiative to look at that COVID impact and how that should then be translated to improvements. I would also recommend expressing the environmental indicators, such as the greenhouse gas emissions per capita. So not only the total per country, but also per capita, because that will really gain an understanding of where the most change in behavior could occur. And I would also like to say that the dashboard, the data that are not there, it should stimulate action to collect the data that are missing. And I see many opportunities for further collaboration, which we're also already discussing. The Hunger Map Live, the integration of the data that we produce on cost and non-affordability of diets, also at the subnational level. Target group specific indicators of the cost and affordability of diets. And also with the food prices for nutrition program that Tufts, the World Bank and IFPRI are embarking on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saskia. It's really great to see all these initiatives being joined up, because unless we join them up, it just seems to me that we're not going to get the critical mass that we need. And it's really great to see to hear that there are lots of connections with the work you're spearheading, and I hope a lot of my dashboard colleagues were taking notes about the suggestions, the excellent suggestions you made, especially around environment and per capita notions, per capita measures, incorporating some of the COVID realities and the potential impacts and mitigations, and of course bringing in the SOFI 2020 data and focusing a bit more on target groups. All of those are really, really good suggestions. Thank you so much, Saskia. Finally, we come to, last but not least, Tatiana von Steger. Tatiana is the Deputy Assistant Director General of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, also known as SDC. Tatiana, welcome. Tatiana, the SDC is committed to initiatives and actions that would change development systems in a sustainable way. We know that systems thinking is a very big part of the DNA at SDC. How would you like to see the dashboard evolve in the future to bring in additional development? Over to you, Tatiana.
Thanks a lot, Lawrence, and thanks very much to the organizers for the opportunity to talk. I would also like to thank the two keynote speakers for their inspiring presentations. Now, Lawrence, to your question. I'm not entirely sure whether I understand the meaning of your question, respectively, whether we should already discuss bringing in additional development goals. What is clear to me today, however, is the following, which I can summarize in 7 points. First, the world with COVID even more is off track when it comes to turning the needle and living up to what we have committed to back in 2015. Second, we have to use the next 10 years to do everything in order to get back on track and focus all our efforts on implementing the SDGs. Third, for this to happen, we need to focus on key areas of systemic transformation. Sustainable food systems and healthy nutrition are one of these. And fourth, for a systemic transformation to take place in a manner that no one is being left behind, structural deficiencies have to be addressed. And this is only possible if we ensure equity in addition to equality. So if we want to leave no one behind, we really have to focus on that. And there, my 5th point is on the importance of instruments, tools that help us in this endeavor, like the dashboard. These instruments are key. The 6th point is why I think digital tools such as the dashboard are very useful to support system change. Why is this so? This is as they provide us with real-time data, as well as can bring transparency. When assessing the impact of these tools, let's not forget that A, we still need to make sure that we collect data that is reliable, independent and comparable, as well as that it helps us also to identify which data we need to collect, even if it doesn't exist yet. B, the tool is only as good as how it is being used by policymakers, and previous speakers have already hinted to that. For this, combining the No Regrets project with the dashboard is instrumental. But we also need to assess and adapt these instruments on a continued basis. As said by Sofia Ascardi, we need to continuously promote it in showing how it brought changes and how it had an impact. Otherwise, these instruments will not help us and bring us to where we want to get to. So in conclusion, my 7th point, I invite us all to use next year's World Data Forum as a moment to assess where we stand with the dashboard, what we need to undertake to adapt it and render it into the tool that allows us shaping public policies that turn food systems into something that promotes and ensures healthy nutrition for all. Because the World Data Forum really brings together experts from all over the world that try to understand what kind of data has to be collected to bring system change. Thank you. Back to you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Tatiana. Really good reminders that, look, if this tool is not used, it doesn't really add any value. And just putting it out there doesn't mean it will be used. So there's a whole set of things that we have to do to get from the tool to action. There's a strong theory of change that needs to be out there. We have developed that, but we should go and road test it at the World Data Forum and learn if we can do better and learn from others. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the things we're hoping very much the dashboard will be helpful for is the accountability mechanism for the UN Food System Summit, which will be to produce an annual report on the state of food systems, as well as a monitor of the pledges and commitments that have been made by governments, businesses, and others. So that's one very specific and tangible use that we want to make of the dashboard, but there are many others at the national and subnational level, and we have to work hard to make that happen. It won't just happen on its own. Thank you for reminding us about equity issues. They are part of the dashboard. We're trying to figure out how we can make it an even bigger part of the dashboard. But I think I'll stop there. Colleagues, somewhat amazingly, we are almost on time. Thank you all for being so brief and concise. And we have lots of questions from the chat box. And I'm going to ask someone to answer them. They mostly seem to be to Jessica and Corinna, but if any of the other panelists would like to jump in with brief answers, please just do that after either Jessica or Corinna have answered. And Jessica and Corinna, please keep your answers as brief as possible. So Corinna, one of the first questions was, is the No Regrets work and the dashboard just really a tool for governments, or can this be relevant for industry? Over to you.
Absolutely relevant for industry as well. So I talked very much from a public policy perspective in my presentation, and that was the original intention. But again, we realized through the process of putting together these pathways to impact, we have a column on who can lead and who can implement. And we realized, of course, that this goes way beyond public policy in terms of who actually initiates and who is able to take the first step. And we want all of those who are committed to take the first step. And that absolutely includes industry, it includes NGOs and others, and researchers and others across the system. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinna. Next question is around the observation that we seem to have very little data on consumer behavior in the dashboard. In fact, none, as far as I know. And someone said, why is that the case, and where should we look to that to fill those gaps? And if we don't really understand that, is the dashboard how limiting is that for the usefulness of the dashboard? So maybe Jess, you can kick us off, and maybe I can ask Roy maybe to jump in on that one as well. Jess.
Yeah, it's a great question, and just I'm answering a lot of the questions in the Q&A. I think Corinna is as well, so check that as we go along. We really have no data on, we have some data on what we call individual factors, but really nothing on consumer behavior. And I would argue there's really two big reasons for that. One is that when we look at the diet data landscape, we still don't know a lot about what people eat and why they make certain choices and how that fits within their life and the constraints that people have. So, a lot of even the diet data we have on the dashboard is estimated modeled data. So, and Saskia knows this space well, and some of the issues with estimates and modeled data for diet. So we don't really understand a lot of the behaviors around why people make certain choices. Now, that said, there is data out there on consumer behavior and drivers of dietary choice, but we don't have it representing all countries. When we started to delve into looking for consumer behavior data, you'd see it in places like the United States or the UK or Australia. And we're very cognizant that we don't want this database to be where countries have collected a lot of data. And it tends to lean more towards high income countries. And we didn't want to create a biased database that's only showing a couple of high income countries. So we want data that's representative from around the world. Now, where can we get that data? Well, there's a lot of people working on indicators for tracking consumer behavior around the world. But also, we know that private sector, a lot of food and beverage industries collect consumer behavior data. They do a lot of focus group types of methodology to collect data. And so how do we make that a space where food and beverage companies could potentially come together and put that data out there? That gets a bit contentious. That data is often proprietary. And we need to be looking at that more carefully. But right now, yeah, there's a real dearth in that space. And Lawrence and I have talked to several different organizations and companies about this limitation of the dashboard. Lawrence, I don't know if you want to add any more to that, and then Roy can come in here.
I was just going to say, I'm glad I don't have to answer any of these difficult questions. It is a real problem, and one of the things that one of the small contributions that GAIN is making, along with others, is setting up something called a demand generation alliance, which is to try to bring together the community in the public and the private space who are worrying about why, not what do consumers purchase and consume, but why do they purchase it and why do they consume it, and how can that be nudged and influenced towards greater health and away from unhealthy foods. And there are lots of different organizations working on this issue, but they're all really small initiatives, and the issue itself hasn't really risen to the top of the food system agenda, actually. And when you think about it, it's really consumers that could have the potential to be massive drivers of change in the food system. And yet a lot of the drivers are focused in other areas. So don't have a good answer for you yet, but we're working on it. Roy, do you want to add anything, or Saskia?
Sure. Hey, it's a great question. Actually, there's a ton of data available, but it's all in the private sector. I mean, I guarantee you, Nestle, Unilever really understands their consumers. They're spending not millions, tens of millions of dollars to do that, but we're not going to have access to that data. And so we need to find ways to, once again, going back to the theme of democratizing data and enabling people to get access to understanding how, what are people eating and how do you shift that? There's two things I think, and Gain is involved with this Gallup poll, which is using this dietary quality questionnaire to really just, we don't have good, widespread understanding of the basic dietary, what people are actually eating. And I think we need to do that. And these new questionnaires that are coming out that are very simple, easy to administer, I think are going to really help with that. So that's one. We really identified this as an issue and have been talking with other funding partners. Specifically, we were just launched with the IDRC and the Canadian IDRC and with Wellcome Trust, a research program that will be specifically looking at consumer behavior and the policies that affect that. We only have enough funds right now for parts of Africa. We're hoping that other funders will become interested in it and expand that research to a larger number of countries, etc. But we need specific consumer research if we're going to have any hope to influence the policies that are needed to, in some cases, really address the very negative marketing that's going on. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Roy. Really insightful. It's always great to hear when donors, research funders come together to fund joint things. I'm always very excited by that.
And we need more funders, so,
Yeah. Saskia, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's also, it's the behavior. So what diets do people choose? But also what drives that behavior. And that's, of course, where the affordability comes in. So we're saying if people can hardly afford to meet their energy requirements, what options, what choices can you actually make? Very few. So I'm thinking for this, maybe we also should think about sort of a contextualization by food system type. We want to understand behavior, but I think we cannot have the same indicators all across, and we have to start diving a bit deeper by context characteristics.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Saskia. Two more clusters of questions have come in. There's one cluster around subnational. How do we make this work at the subnational? What are we looking for in the pilots that we will do for this? A related question in that first cluster is around can the dashboard work at the city level, either prime capital city or secondary city level? So there's that set of subnational city level target group kind of questions, and there's another set of questions which is really around, is the dashboard relevant or helpful at all in fragile contexts, in the humanitarian space? I think those are the two main clusters of questions I see. So who would like to, rather than me assign anyone, who on the panel or the speakers would like to kick off the discussion on the subnational space?
I can make a couple of brief comments, Lawrence. I can't speak for the data. Jess and others can speak to that, but just very briefly on the action side, that all of these actions most of these actions, not all of them, it depends on the country context and who has power to do what. But many of these actions can also be implemented at the city level and the municipal level. And in fact, what we're seeing is that it's often at the city level and the urban level where we're seeing more progressive urban governments try out some of these actions. And I think what's really exciting about the city and subnational level is that there can be, not always, there can be more flexibility to try out these types of actions and to see if they work in that particular context. So from an action and policy perspective, the answer is absolutely that this is relevant from a subnational and city perspective. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else on the subnational pilots topic?
If I may.
Go ahead.
If,
Go ahead, Ambassador.
Yes, I should say that in Indonesia, it is also already goes up to the sub-district. So not only in the city, but also in the sub-district and rural area. But of course, to some area, it is still work hard because of the internet connections. But we try to go more and more to the rural area, because with this, the agricultural extension worker can use all the data, and they know how to do and to give an advice and support to the small farmers or to the any smallholders agriculture at the very rural or sub-district level. And it is a very good that maybe we have to also include what you call about the consumer behavior. But of course, in Indonesia, every province or every area have a different staple food that we ever have make a mistake policy that everybody should arise. But actually, in every area with a different geographical, they have a different staple food. So this can be help for the private sector also, how they will give advice how to have a healthy diet for them. This is what I contribute to you. Over.
Thank you, Esti. Jessica, did you want to come in?
Yeah, this has been a kind of an ongoing conversation about subnational city type data. And I think we want to do that because when policymakers are making decisions about the food system, they're looking subnationally. And I think this is a next phase of the dashboard, but it's quite complicated in the idea of we would like to have all countries have subnational data. And obviously that's going to take a long time for multiple reasons, looking at the type of data that countries are collecting subnationally, the quality of that data, but also are countries willing to share some of that subnational data on a global platform that is open access. So we've been in some conversations and we've actually taken some lessons learned from Saskia's team on some of the challenges with subnational data, but clearly there's a need for that to make more specific recommendations on how to fix food systems, because we know that countries have many different types of food systems within a country. So it's something that we will be investigating when we start to do some of the pilot country work. We're starting in Senegal, Ethiopia, and Tanzania, but we hope, and that's Senegal is being supported by USAID, so thanks to them for that. But we hope to be able to start looking at what kind of data is available subnationally. What is the quality of that data? How do we then put it on a global open access platform?
Thanks, Jess. Panelists and speakers, I'm going to move us on to the next topic because we're running out of time. And I really do want to get onto the topic of fragile contexts and humanitarian action. I imagine Saskia could say some things on this. I imagine Hans could also talk to this, and potentially Sophia or Tatiana. But really, the floor is open. How do we make this as relevant and useful for action in the humanitarian space as we could?
Perhaps, Loris, can I start before I would say, if we goes into the more specifics? I think when you look to the guidelines, it's an absolute must that we also look to the humanitarian context, and that we also look, I think, to the conflict issues, and I would say the crisis. And when you look to the guidelines, there you see that the guidelines clearly define guidelines towards government and those involved in conflict about protecting the most vulnerable to malnutrition in humanitarian context when it comes to conflicts. It's about the access, even in a conflict area, to nutritious foods. But it's also speaking about improving the quality of food and nutrition assistance. It's not only about giving food support or food aid, it's also giving nutritious food aid. And last but not least, of course, we have to make sure that also the food systems are resilient when we are confronted with a crisis, whether it would be a conflict or whether it would be a climate change crisis. And those guidelines are quite specific. So if we, and of course, when we agree to those guidelines at the end of this year, it's important that they are implemented as soon as possible. And there I count also on not only WFP to support the implementation, but I also look to you, Lawrence, because you are the link now to the World Food System Summit, where action is needed. And I think the World Food System Summit is the forum where we can start getting attention, but can start the implementation of the guideline. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. And we will have that conversation shortly, I'm sure. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Anyone else like to talk about the humanitarian space? It's one of the worst, it's one of the best kept secrets, I think, outside of that space, that in countries that are fragile and conflict affected, those are the countries in which hunger is rapidly increasing. And in countries that are much more stable and not fragile, hunger is actually decreasing.
May I come in here? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hello, may I come in?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think in countries where you have pockets of wars or insurgencies, like in the northeast of Nigeria, the IDP camps require a lot of data on food, quality of food, the whole gamut of women, children, adolescents, and so on and so forth. And this sort of data actually is so critical, and I'm sure WFP will give us a feeling on this one, because they're working very hard in that area. And it's so important that, in fact, Nigeria established a ministry, new Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. Here, this data has to be of high quality, right on time, so as to decide what needs to be moved to where. I think this one is one thing that I want to add to it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ambassador. And a new Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management that is going to be hungry for real-time, high-quality data so they can guide action. It's music to my ears. It's a challenge, however. We know that data is one of the first casualties of conflict and disruption. So we have to find ways around that, and I'm sure we can. Colleagues, I hate to draw this to a close because we've had such a great discussion and great panelists and great speakers, but we have to respect the time. I just have two very brief concluding comments. The dashboard is all about use the dashboard, help us improve the dashboard, most importantly, act on the dashboard. The no regrets work, as Corinna introduced it, is no regrets, no excuses, just do it, just act. There are things that you know you can do, act. It's not easy for governments. They're implored by lots of different groups to say, do this, do that. We have to make it easy for governments to act in this space. And that's what the dashboard and the no regrets work is trying to do. And to continue the theme of action, Hans has reminded us that the UN Food System Summit is all about actions. The UN Special Envoy, Agnes Kalibata, has said this is a people's summit and it's a solution summit. So it's very much geared around action, and it's very much geared around let's find the solutions from wherever they come from from the usual and the unusual places, from the youth and from the elderly, from the fragile and from the not fragile. And I just want to remind everybody that these actions have to be co-constructed, they have to be scalable, they have to be sustainable, and I think, as Tatiana said, they have to change the structures, they have to change the rules of the game. My final point is really reiterating something Jessica said. The dashboard works very hard to make it relevant for all countries. Why is that? That's because all countries have food system challenges. No country has a monopoly on the problems of food systems, and no country has a monopoly on the solutions. We must all work together to transform all of our food systems. And this is the year in which we really get serious about that process. I'd like to thank the CFS. I'd like to thank FAO for being such great partners. And I'd like to thank all the speakers and panelists and all of the participants for some really excellent questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. Thank you very much, colleagues. Have a great rest of the week.